Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Today we try to wrap up our discussion on the Renaissance, the Elizabethan and the Jacobean ages. So far we've spoken about drama. We consider this the golden age of drama. And then we spoke about poetry. But don't forget that drama was mainly written in poetry, in verse, not in prose. Okay? John Donne was a poet. Shakespeare was a dramatist and a poet. Marlowe was a dramatist and a poet. Major dramatists were also poets because drama was written in poetry. So today we move to speak about prose. So far, prose was not significant in many ways because when it comes to literature, we only have poetry so far. Poetry and drama, poetry and drama. And drama is poetry. Don't forget this. Because we still don't have many people who can read, and the printing press wasn't still, it's 200 years old in England, but still printing books was not cheap. You had to have a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of people who could read and write at that time. But gradually, many people started to learn to read and write. And this helped the rise of the middle class. And the newspaper and journalism did an amazing job in this regard. Today we'll speak about 8 types of prose writing in the Elizabethan and the Jacobean ages or in the Renaissance. We'll focus on 3 or 4 of them because they are more significant than the other part. So number 1, remember, English language wasn't regulated in many ways. We had many ways of spelling something. And remember, even Shakespeare had his name spelled. He spelled his name in 17 different ways. That's a lot of ways. But gradually, everything was being standardized here in a way that people started to write dictionaries to determine the right spelling of particular words. But the most major, the most important, and major literary works or prose works that help the English language are, number 1, we have Shakespeare. So Shakespearean texts, the drama itself, it wasn't written to be read. Remember this. It was written to be performed, acted on stage. And that's crucial. And that's why the dramatization is important here. But Shakespeare helped shape the English language because Shakespeare used the language of, not the language of the Middle English or Old English, but the language of the Renaissance, the language of the people of that time. So many people would be watching Shakespeare and they would totally understand his stuff. And in addition to Shakespeare and other literary texts, we have the prose writings. They also help, number 1, form the English language, give the English language the shape we have now. Of course, it developed still a lot more after that, but English had particular rules to be followed easily. The other important reason mainly for prose, so again, this is prose and Shakespeare and other writers, but mainly Shakespeare, helped give the English language the shape it has now. The other important thing is that early prose, the Renaissance prose, gave us again an idea about the early prose writing, such as travel writing and the novel itself. The novel wasn't, by the way, the word novel means, do you know what it means? Novel. It is, yeah, this is the definition. It's a long story in prose. But what does it mean, the word itself? Novel. In English. In English, the word novel means new. New, yeah. You could say, oh, this is a novel idea. And we have the word novice. And I think in Arabic, with some people like novi, like new. Because compared to poetry and drama, the novel is new in many ways. So early Renaissance prose writing helped give us examples of the many forms of writings we had in later ages. So number 1, the major prose work is the Bible itself. The Bible, Why are we speaking about the Bible here? Yes?
Because it wasn't written in English language.
Thank you very much. For over 1,000 years, and this is in a way crazy. England is now a Christian country, but the major book of Christianity was not in English. There were some translations, but they were not authorized, they were not good. It was in Latin. And now King James. Remember King James, the lover of literature, of drama, he brought the masks and everything. He also helped, supported the translation of the Bible. It's called the authorized version of the Bible. There are a lot of similarities between the language of the Bible and the language of Shakespeare. There's something here, but it's not something we are interested in. But because they wrote it in a very poetic way. Some of it could be poetic, but it's generally a prose book. And it's King James the First. Okay? And the Bible became, the stories of the Bible, the language of the Bible became part of the lives of every English person living during that time. So that's number one, the Bible. Okay? The second type, you don't have to write this because I already posted this on the Facebook group we have. Just pay attention. So, again, the authorized version of the authorized because it was translated to English, into English. Not by, he didn't do it himself physically, he ordered, he supported, he paid money for people to translate it. Okay? The second point, something called pamphlets. You know pamphlets, like when you write 2, 3, like an article, like 3, 5, 10 pages, and it can be sold or given to particular people. Pamphlets, زي ملزمة يعني, like you have, some of you here have pamphlets on particular topics. The pamphlets were early examples of news articles, but many of them focused on very comic issues, comedy. And again, remember we said at that time people considered tragedy more important than comedy. It doesn't mean comedy is not important, because you still can criticize the society in a funny way where sometimes you can make fun of somebody, you can have a crazy person make a joke about the king that in serious situation cannot be accepted. But this is a crazy person, this is comedy, this is for fun, haha. But in reality, even jokes and comedy can shake the authority, can attack and criticize in their own way. So what is the important thing about the pamphlets? The fact that it used comedy to discuss issues in the society like thieves and cheats and very funny stories. Again, comedy will start to be more common. And this is taken in a way from drama, from Shakespeare. In my opinion, travel writings are the most important issue we'll have to talk about today. Listen, don't look here, look at me. What is travel writing? What do you think? What is travel writing? Yeah.
Writing is about the new discoveries.
Okay. Remember we spoke about the Renaissance, geographical discoveries. Yeah. What else? So, writing about the new discoveries. What else? What? Yeah. Stories about people who travel to the new world, or stories about imaginary countries. The Tempest in Shakespeare is imaginary in many ways, but there could be stories about other places around the world. And travel writing was very crucial for 3 main reasons, like I say here. Number one, when you write about other places, when people at that time wrote about other places, sometimes they would describe the perfect society. It's called the utopia. What's the utopia? Utopia means the perfect country, the perfect place. Medina al-Fadila in Arabic. The utopia. And actually, it doesn't exist in real life. But when you imagine it, when you write extensively about this, it's because of 2 things here. Number one, you want to change your own society, to improve it, to tell people, see, this is what should happen. Or because you want to attack and criticize. You want to attack particular vices in your society. If this is if you write, for example, a story about Gaza where there are no problems, everything is fine, there are no taxes here, the borders are not closed all the time, you can easily travel wherever you want, you can buy whatever you want, don't have trouble with transportation. This could be an attack on the fact that this society is horrible, or a dream. You're dreaming of a better future. You're saying that there should be a better life here. And this is something that this text actually, the Utopia, was a book written by, we'll see in the next slide here, by someone called Thomas More. The Utopia. The Utopia is actually a travel writing by Thomas More. Not Thomas Less, Thomas More. Even his name once more. Like Oliver Twist, if you know. Please, sir. Okay? So why does Thomas More discuss this utopia in his book, this perfect world? Possibly because he's encouraging people to change their own society. He's giving them a model for the perfect society. A society without corruption and sins and everything. Or he's attacking the society because he can show the right model, and we're very far away from this. Now, the other significant point for our course is colonialism. I'll write it here. Colonialism. How many times did we mention colonialism?
3 times.
3, not 4. Remember colonialism and imperialism? Now, this book is good, really. The textbook we have here is really good. But in many ways, it misrepresents something. It hides some truth, some facts, and it presents the British Empire and the English history as pure, without evil, without wrongdoing sometimes. When the book speaks about colonialism and occupying other places in Africa, in America, in Asia, they speak about the colonial glory, the great geographical discoveries. And beneath that, because you're smart, you should always read between the lines. And beneath this, okay, geographical discoveries, great. But these geographical discoveries meant the occupation of other nations, the destruction of other nations. As Palestinians were suffering from this, the British Empire, even 100 years later. So the book, in a way, sometimes whitewashes. You know whitewashes? Whitewashes the British Empire and its crimes and its imperialism. Whitewashes means it represents the good aspect, the good things, and hides the bad things about the British imperialism and colonialism. So travel writing, in a way, remember the Tempest? In the Tempest for Shakespeare, we said the Tempest could be an allegory of imperialism. An allegory means a story, a symbolic story. An allegory of imperialism, of colonialism. Which means, what happens in the Tempest? Remember? A king was removed by his brother, and now he isn't a king. He is nothing. But he's exiled to an island that has its people in a way or another. But when this white European man goes to this island, he says, my island. He controls it. In a way, this prepares the British, the English, the European mind that wherever you go, you can be the master. You still can be a king. Even if you're not a king here, even if you're not educated, even if you're not smart. You go there to Africa, to Asia, to America, to the Caribbean, and you can be the master of the people there. This is what is meant by allegory of imperialism. It teaches, again, colonialism. Travel writing teaches the English people here and prepares their minds that they are the masters of the world. When you read a story, for example, there is another story here about a place called El Dorado. El Dorado. And El Dorado is a city of gold. It means literally a city of gold. And by the way, this is still there in English movies and English cartoons. Sometimes we watch a particular cartoon movie and somebody goes to a faraway place, exotic place, and then there are, treasures and there's gold and diamonds and all sorts of treasures and gems and everything. So in a way, you're telling the people like, hey, you should go out there. It tells you that there is a lot of money out there. What the hell are you doing here in London, in England? Go out. Take the next ship next week and just travel and you will be rich overnight. And this is, again, in a way to prepare the minds that they can control the whole world. Funny thing about El Dorado here, it's fiction, right? There is no place consisting of gold. You can't go to a particular place and find Alibaba's cave where there is a lot of gold, where you just swim in gold, in coins, in money, and treasures and everything. But this city was talked about in a real book of travel. A real book, not fictional book. So when people read this, you're reading, for example, about Africa, about Morocco, about America, about the Caribbean, about Asia, about India. And all of a sudden, somewhere you read about El Dorado. In a way, when it comes to travel writing, fact was fiction and fiction was fact. Or fiction was treated as fact. It's exactly like when someone keeps teaching you. If I keep teaching you here for months and months about a particular place that has, a particular university where you don't have to do exams and everyone gets full marks and teachers are nice, all of them, and you don't have to study and you get your certificate just overnight. You want to go there in a way, I think, because it makes your life easier, a lot easier than it is now. So number 2, travel writing. Travel writing generally tries to depict other countries, other places. Sometimes we have fiction, like the Utopia, to criticize and to try to promote change. But sometimes travel writing encourages colonialism and imperialism. And there is a lot of racism here. Because usually the native people are not represented. Again, exactly what the Zionist movement did. When they talked about Palestine 100 years ago and before, they were talking about Palestine as a land that is empty, a land without a people. Okay, we are a people, but we don't have a land, so let's go there. So the Zionist movement, the Zionists used literature to try to convince a lot of Jews around the world to go to Palestine. What did they do? When they spoke about Palestine, in their literature, I did a research paper on this. In their literature, in their poetry, you read 100 poems by Jewish people in Russia, in Europe, and somewhere else. When you read the poetry, and they speak about Palestine, about Jerusalem, you don't find Palestinian or Arab people in the poetry. So we don't exist in their literature. So they try to convince their people, let's go there. When the natives exist in the literature, they are negatively framed. They are backward, they are stupid, they are savages, they need to be civilized. And who can civilize these savages? The white people, the Christians, the Europeans. They have a moral obligation to civilize the world. Travel writing, very important. Okay? Next, the romance. Now, the romance here was more famous, common in Europe than in the rest of Europe than in England. Like Sir Gawain and the Knight of the Green Knight, but that one was written in verse. This one was written in prose, but similar themes, similar issues about heroes, about knights who achieve, who fight the monsters in order to try to get the woman they love. The romance is significant because it is considered the origin of the novel. 50 years later, we'll have a new genre called a novel. It started from the epic, but the epic was poetry, and then it moved to the romance because it was loose in form but was written in prose. And later on, we had probably 50 years later, in around 1719, we have the first official novel. And even that we'll speak about. Because in English books, even this book tells us that the first novel was written by a man, Daniel Defoe. In reality, there was a woman who wrote prose. But because of the canon, what happened to the woman? She was kicked out. She was ignored. Okay, so the Bible, the authorized version of the Bible, the pamphlets, and we were comic, travel writing, colonialism, don't forget this, and the romance. And there were, again, because people were printing stuff, there were many essays. You know, an essay like a long paragraph, like a piece of writing consisting of several paragraphs about a particular issue. And next, we have religious writing. The most famous religious writer here, he wasn't a writer actually. He was a speaker, a monk, a priest, John Donne. Remember John Donne? Yeah? He's a religious man. A religious man. He wrote several religious texts, but mainly they were kind of public speeches, sermons. You know public speeches? Yes. That's John Donne. And then there were also illustrated books. And it's interesting how books were varying in structure, in form, in theme, in issues. So if you want to read religious stuff, you'll find something to read. Travel, you'll find something to read. Literature, you'll find something to read. And the illustrated books were interesting because they used both verse and sometimes verse and pictures in addition to the prose describing things. Like now, we love looking at pictures in books here. Sometimes you have a big book, 1,000 pages, you read it and you find some interesting pictures in the book about somebody. The first thing you start with, you look at the pictures. People love pictures. So illustrated books, but clearly this could be very expensive, more expensive than, because you need someone to make the drawings. And I think we'll have to stop here with the seventh type of writing, illustrated books. Now, what happens? This is basically, of course, we could spend years speaking about the Renaissance age, but these lectures are only meant to give you just introductions about the main events, the main people, and the main writers. Now, the Renaissance ended, remember, not only drama, the whole age ended in some kind of political fighting and turmoil. The theater was closed by the Puritans, and the Puritans became more and more powerful, and they even executed the king. The King of England, remember, the spokesman of God, God's spokesperson, the most important person on earth. The king was killed in Shakespeare and other plays. In plays. And for the first time here, the English king was executed, was killed. And they kicked the monarchy away, and Cromwell will speak about this next week, where we have a new era called the Commonwealth and the Restoration. We'll see what happens. England has almost always been governed by a king or a queen. For over 1,000 years, and overnight you don't have a king. There was a revolution, there was the Civil War, and the fightings. What do you do now? You've been used to having a king because the king has become part of your life, part of your culture, part of your language, of your literature, of your mentality, of your identity. What do you do? we'll see next class. When we speak about the Commonwealth, Oliver Cromwell, and the Restoration. Do you have any question? Any question? Prose? The Renaissance age? Okay, someone tell me why travel writing is significant to colonialism. I just said this. I want someone to repeat in a way or another, or tell me what you think of travel writings as a colonial tool, an imperialistic tool here. Yes, please.
Because they describe
Okay, travel writing.
because travel writing
Okay.
describes the occupation of the new lands and killing the native people as a new invention and a new as a new thing and something they should be proud of, and they show the positive side of it and hide the bad side, like they own this land originally.
Okay. What else? Thank you. Very good. Please.
I think travel writing is important. It's important for 3 points. First, that it encourages colonialism,
Okay.
and it incites stability, and also it changed the new, or it seeks the new life.
Okay. So when we speak about the society itself of that time, it helps the society because it reveals, in a way, the corruption, the vices, by speaking about the perfect society like we have in the Utopia by Thomas More. But when it comes to other societies, remember England was expanding. The British Empire was expanding all across the globe, occupying new lands every year. Geographical, here in the book described as geographical discoveries. And it's funny because discovery means like nobody is there. Nobody has been there, has seen it or used it before, right? But what? You discover what? You discover Australia, there are people there. You discover New Zealand, there are people there. You discover India, I don't know. There are people. You discover America, there are people there. But what happens to the natives, to the original people? Yeah, like in America, millions and millions and millions of Native Americans were murdered, massacred, brutally massacred. America was built on genocide and blood and destruction. And it happens in Africa. Africa probably took the heaviest blow out because of colonialism. Not only British, but also other countries, French and Dutch, like European colonialism. Africa is still suffering the consequences of imperialism. So how are the native people represented in the box, in the travel box generally? Number one, before the negative framing. They are not there. These countries are empty. Sometimes it's not easy to convince someone to go to another place where there are people. So first of all, there are no people there. So it's waiting for you. And same, remember the Zionist movement again, I have to say this again. They describe Palestine as the land that flows with milk and honey. But there are no people there. And it's they contradict themselves because sometimes they describe Palestine as the desert. The desert where there are no people there. But sometimes they describe it as the place where we have honey, not only honey, milk and honey, it flows with milk. So you go to Palestine and you swim in rivers it's like paradise. It's heaven on earth. Maybe we can speak about this at the end of this course, how the Zionist movement, and this is very important, very serious, used literature to occupy Palestine metaphorically first, in metaphor, in poetry. Palestine was occupied in books, in poems, well before it was occupied physically, militarily. And that's the serious impact of literature. That's why you should consider a career in writing for yourself in the future. You could be a poet, a short story writer, a journalist. Studying English as a tool, it helps to facilitate your career path in the future, but it could be also a tool of speaking up, of empowerment. You empower yourself, you reach out to people, and you resist by exposing the crimes and the colonialist, the Israeli colonialist enterprise in Palestine. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you very much. If you have more questions, we can do later on. Thank you.